Welcome everybody to MASECHET Baba Kama Daf Bet. A lot of the things that we're going to be discussing in this Masechet. Right, we finished with Nashim. Now we're talking about Seder Nizikin. This can be damages between one person and another, including their property. All right, so Arba Avot Nizikin. There are four primary main categories of damagers: Hashor, an ox; Habor, the pit; Hamavre, Mavre, we're going to discuss and define soon; Veha and fire. So now all these things are different from each other. Lo hare shor ki hare hamav'eh. Shor is not similar to mav'eh. We'll discuss what that is. Velo hare mav'eh ki hare shor, and mav'eh is not similar to the ox. Velo ze v'ze sheyesh behen ruach hayim. And ox and mav'eh are living things, while the other ones aren't. Ki hare ha'esh en baruach hayim. Unlike fire, which is not alive. Velo ze v'ze shedarakana dech lahazik. And the ox, the mav'eh, and the fire go out to damage, while kare habor, the pit, doesn't go out to damage. Rather, you get damaged by going to it. All right, so four main categories are all different from each other. What you do have, the common denominator between all four, is that all of them naturally damage, and it's up to you to watch it, the owner. And therefore, when it does damage, the damager, the guy who owns it, is have to pay for the damages. And if you have to pay with property, real estate, karka, you have to pay with the best of the property. Okay, that's the Mishnah. The Gemara says, Avot. And the fact that the Mishnah started off by talking about primary, right, the four main categories, Michlal, Deika, Todot. That sounds like and infers that you have todot, subcategories or minor categories, right? If you're saying, oh, there's four main categories, that means there are minor. So the question is, todotehen kayotzaben or lav kayotzaben. So these subcategories, do they have the same halacha or not? We're going to go through this for a couple of dapim. Gabe Shabbat Tanan. So now let's look elsewhere where we have major categories avot and minor categories todot. All right, the first thing that comes to mind is Hilchot Shabbat. Right? What do we have? Avot melachot 40 chaser achat. You have 39 melachot. Avot mechad ikladot. So to over there, we said that there's sounds like there's primary and subcategories. Todotehen kiyotzbehen. Over there, we say that the minor categories have the same halachot as the avot. Right? If you do a toda of a melacha, it's the same thing as doing the av melacha. Right? So lo shna av hatat, lo shna toda hatat. Right? And regarding to Hilchot Shabbat, if you do an av melacha or a toda, you are chayav a korban hatat. Lo shna av skila, lo shna toda skila. So it's regarding if you that was by shogeg. If it was done on purpose, you'd be chayav skila either way. So umay ika ben av toda. Therefore, what's the difference between an av and a toda? Right? There's no difference in halacha. So what is the difference? The Gemara says nafka mina. The difference is the ilu avid shte avot bahade hadade. Right? The only difference is we need to know what is which. Right? We have to identify each one separately to know and what category they fall under, to know in regarding to punishment, because if you do the same av twice, or if you do an av and a toda, but the toda is of the same av, primary category, the minor category are under the same category, you did both of them, but the thing is, you can't be chayav twice. But that's not true if you do two separate ones. Right. So therefore, with the mafkamina, the difference is the reason why we need to categorize them is if someone did two different avot at the same time, or two different todot at the same time, you're chayav a korban hatat for each one. But if you did an av and a toda of the same category, you're still only chayav on the same thing. You can't be chayav twice of the same av / toda if you did it at the same time. Okay, now that's only according to one opinion. According to the where you do need a separate korban hatat, even if it's the same toda and av, right? He said you still be chayav twice. Amai karele av, amai karele toda. So the original question of why do we need to separate them, right? We said according to that opinion, you need to separate them to teach you the halacha of whether or not you need a second korban. Rabbi Eliezer would say you do need a second korban. So according to him, why do we need a separate name of av and toda? The Gemara says it's not a halacha difference, but rather just a That's the way it happened. Right, as we learned in school, how do we have the third nine av melachot? The actual actions that happened in the Mishkan, the building of Mishkan, that is considered av melacha. The other melachot that we have that weren't actually in the Mishkan but became a todah, they're called todot. But true, there's no halacha difference in regarding to punishment like a korban. Okay, so that was one case of av and todah. Now we're going to go on to another one. Another thing that has av and todas are gabe tumot tnan hilchot tumah avot hatumah. The top level of tumah is hasheretz, a dead creature. There's a list of 8 of them in the Torah, which gives av tumah, ashechvat zera of a person, utma met, or a dead person, the corpse. Todoten lav kiyotze. Right, so you want to think of it as like a tag, if you will. You have the highest level avi avot, let's say the corpse, and then you have av tumah. Right, so if you have the corpse, that's the top level of tumah. If someone touches the corpse, they become an av tumah. We welcome our first Kohen of the chat, Stanley Cohen. So you have an av tumah. That is, if someone touches the avi avot, someone touches the corpse, and then if he touches something else, it becomes rishon the tumah, and then second, third, and fourth. So over there we said, the more you pass along, right, so from av, rishon, shani, shlishi, those halachot change as to what becomes tameh, what is eligible to become tameh, right? So if something touches the corpse, everything can become tameh by touching the corpse. Something touches a level 2 or level 3, not everything becomes tameh. What is it? The ilu av metameh adam vekilim. Av tumah can make up people and items tameh. V'ilu todot ochlinu mashpim metameh. Food and drink become tameh. Adam vekilim lo metameh. It's not powerful enough to pass it on to food and utensils. So therefore, hachamai regarding damages, what's the halacha? Are they the same or not? By tumah, it's not the same. By Shabbat, it is the same. Av and todah. What about by us? This sentence we're going to be discussing for at least the next 2 dapim. He says, av and todah by damage, some yes, some no. Some are equal, some are not equal. So now we're going to be spending the next couple dapim figuring out which one is identical to the todah and av, and which one not have identical av and todah. We're going to start. There were 3 primary damagers we just turned the page, by the way, a few minutes ago to Amud Bet. There are 3 main damagers by the Torah in regarding to an ox. An ox can damage in 3 different ways. Hakeren, the horn, right, goring. Hashen, tooth, eating. The haregen, foot, trampling. How do we know that you're chayav for your animal's horn attacks, goring? Tanur the rabbis told in the Braita, when the animal will gore. I know that gorings with the horn. As the pasuk says, "Vayas lo tzidkiya ben kinani karanei barzel, vayomer ko Hashem ko amar Hashem be'elaten agachet Aram." Interestingly enough, we mentioned, side note, Aram was mentioned in today's haftarah. So interesting, we have the haftarah of Shabbat, and it mentions the same name as we're talking about now. In there, it mentions using a horn to gore someone. So, another pasuk says, "Bechor shoro hadar lo vekarne re'em karnev bahem amim yenagach." And the last parasha of Hilchot Beracha mentions that as well. So, we first bring a pasuk from Navi that mentions goring with a handheld horn, and then the second pasuk from Sefer Devarim mentions animals goring. So we see these pasuks we see from these pasuks that goring is done by horns and you are responsible. The Gemara says, "My ve'omer." Why do we need 2 pasukim? You put me Navi, then Devarim. Why both? The reason why, because maybe maybe you can't learn a halacha, hilchot nizikin from Sefer Nevi'im, right? Maybe you can't learn it from Navi. Therefore, tashmash b'chor shoro hadalo. Therefore, we have to bring a pasuk from the actual Humash. Right? Maybe Nach doesn't work. You have to bring from the Torah. Therefore, we brought that one. So the Gemara says, "V'hai melafu." You're not learning a halacha. No one's saying, oh, hayav nizikin from Navi. That's not the halacha. Gilui milta ba'almahu de negicha bekerenu. This is just teaching you when the pasuk says ki yigach, right? Torah said ki yigach, when an ox gores, you're chayav. We wanted to use the Navi pasuk not to teach us that you're chayav, but to teach you that goring is called negicha. Right? It's just teaching you a reference. So why couldn't we use that first pasuk? Where it says Ella because if you only mention the first pasuk where the guy was holding a horn in the Navi, where he was saying we're going to stab someone with it, you might think that there's a difference. The Torah would say there's a difference in regarding to an animal, whether you're a chayav as a tam or mu'ad. Right? Very important. We're going to mention this the whole MASECHET. Tam is an animal that does something that's not called an attacking animal, and you have 3 chances. It's called a tam. 3 chances. After 3 times, you're mu'ad. Once you're mu'ad, you pay full damages. A tam pays half damages because it did something uncommon. Right? People, whatever they do, it's considered mu'ad. Whether you're sleeping, whether you're awake, always mu'ad, the person's chayav. An animal, but does something unnatural, it's considered tam for 3 times and then mu'ad. So maybe the Torah is saying, if it used a detached horn, let's say its horn fell out and it picked it up in its mouth and stabbed someone or something with it, damaged something with it, maybe it'll be considered a tam. Maybe by an attached horn on its head, it's considered a mu'ad. Therefore, right, because the first pasuk was talking about detached, and the second pasuk was talking about attached. So the Gemara says, Tashma b'chor sharo hadalo. Therefore, it says that damage with an attached horn is also considered keren by bringing another pasuk of a ox's horns while it's attached. So now that we talk about horns that you're chayav, now we're going to talk about a toda of horns. Toda de keren mahi. What is considered the toda subcategories of keren? The Gemara says nigifa, pushing, neshicha, biting, revitza, squatting, like sitting on something, uvi'ita, kicking. All right, so even though seemingly these things should be in other categories, we'll explain why they fall under the horns, goring. Why? Why is goring considered an av? Because the pasuk says when an ox gores. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, negifa nami ketiv ki yigof. Why is pushing not also considered an av if the pasuk mentions that if an ox pushes? The Gemara says, "Hai negifa negihahi." That is also referring to pushing, goring. Sorry. Why? Because in that pasuk, when the pasuk is saying if an ox will push your chayav, is referring to when it's pushing something with its horns. That's why it's considered part of a subcategory of keren. The Tanya, the Parsha says, "Patach ben negifa v'siyam ben negiha." That pasuk over there starts off with pushing and ends off with goring. L'mar lecha, to teach you, zuhu negifa, zuhu negiha. That pushing and goring are this one and the same in that context if it's using its horns. Right? So in that pasuk where it mentioned pushing and goring, both referring to horns, it said if an ox will gore a person or pushes an animal, why did it switch off if they're both referring to the horns? Right? You use the same word. When it says Adam right? A person who has intelligence to avoid an attack, if he got attacked by an oxen's horns, that means it was a calculated attack with the horns to gore. However, an animal that does not have mazal, a fellow animal, intelligence to avoid an attack, he probably got pushed with the horn, not even necessarily a calculated attack. So that's another level of keren. Okay. Therefore, Torah is teaching you something else as well. Something that's a mu'ad to attack a person is also considered a mu'ad to attack an animal. Right? So if an animal gored a human 3 times, it's now a mu'ad. You also consider a mu'ad for animals. But if it attacked an animal 3 times, you have no reason to believe that it's considered a mu'ad. You have no reason to believe that it's eligible to or gonna attack a person. Okay. The Gemara says, 1 second. You said biting is considered keren. Why isn't it not considered shen? Tooth, eating. Biting should be part of eating, not part of goring. The Gemara says, lo. It's not compared to shen. Why? Shen yesh hana ala zika. The characteristic of shen, of eating, is referring to when it's getting hana'ah, benefiting from eating, from that damage. It goes over to vegetables on the ground, starts eating, that's shen. Over here, ha'en hazna al hazika. The reason over here by biting is not considered part of shen, but rather part of keren. It's similar. It's more similar to keren because it's biting something to damage without getting hana'ah. Right? For example, it bites a vessel. Right? It bites a jug. Right? That's not considered shen. Shen is damaging to benefit. This is not damaging to benefit. That's why it's considered like keren. Okay, so revitz, next part. Revitza ubi'aitat regli. We said that sitting on something or squatting on something and kicking an item is part of keren. So the Gemara says, why? It should be considered regel, legs, feet. No? Same concept as trampling. The Gemara says, no. La regel hazeka masui. Regel is something that's common. Trampling while walking is common. Hani and hazeka matsui. These are not common. They're more like keren, like goring, which is uncommon, right? If he just decides to sit on something to destroy it, or if he kicks something out of the way, right? That means actively going something to kick it, not just in its pathway of trampling. That's regel. Okay. Right. So therefore, we see that keren were similar, were the same thing as its subcategories. So now, when Papa said that some things are not like the av, the subcategories are not like the av, we're still trying to figure it out. When Papa said that the subcategories are not like the primary category, ahai, which was referring to ilamahani. If we talk about keren, maishna keren, the kavantola hazik one chosh mitalecha. The main category of the ox is to damage, and you're chayav on it. Hanenama kavantola hazik one chosh. All these subcategories that I mentioned, the biting, the kicking, the trampling, etc., the squatting, also same thing. It's trying to damage and it's your property, and you're chayav on it. So maybe we'll try to do the next one. Ela todot dere keren ki keren v'kikamar rapapa ashen v'regem. Because we're saying that the subcategories of keren are identical to the primary category of keren, and therefore when Papa said that it wasn't similar, it maybe it's referring to shen and regel. So we're gonna just start a little bit. Shen v'regel hechaktivi. Where do we know that shen and regel are chayav in Torah? The Tanya, the person says v'shilach zeharegel. If someone sends his animal, that's referring to regel, right? Standing to walk. Additionally, we see elsewhere, sending an ox or a donkey. When the pasuk says burning or consuming, zuha shen is referring to shen. Correction, not burning, consuming. Additionally, we see the tooth shall consume until the end, meaning it's getting eaten to completion. Amen.